In 2015, about 13,000 people in the U.S. Were killed from gun homicide, unintentional shooting, and/or murder and suicide. You should listen to me because I want you to understand your rights to bear arms and not be one of those statistics killed by firearms. Firearms have been an interest of mine growing up, thanks to my father. In this speech, I will inform you about Proposition 63. The banning of large capacity magazine and enforcement of background checks on ammunition purchases. I will be discussing three different points. First, I will inform you about the enforcement of background checks on ammunition purchases and how it affects criminals and people that use shoot as a sport. Second, I will inform you how banning large capacity magazine affect criminals and people that shoot as a sport. And third, I will inform you how Proposition 63 will affect the buying and selling cost of ammunition purchases. So let's begin with enforcing background checks on ammunition purchases. This means that before you can purchase ammunition, you would have to get a permit by passing a background check, which you would have to renew every 4 years. Also, not only do the buyers have to get a permit, but also the sellers have to get a one-year license to sell ammunition. But on the other hand, on how it affects criminals is that criminals have to outsource where they get their ammunition by either getting it from a different state, resort to stealing, or resort to getting it from someone that has the license to buy ammunition. Chris Nicholas, reporter for the Capital Republic Radio 2016, states that new crime, selling to a felon, will be classified as a misdemeanor, up to 1 year jail time and $1,000 fine. Now that I finished talking to you about how enforcing background checks on ammunition purchases affects criminals and people with background checks, I will let you know how the banning of large capacity magazine affects criminals and people with background checks. This means that any magazine that holds more than 10 rounds will be banned in California, and people caught with these magazines would be charged with an infraction or else a misdemeanor. Patrick McGravy, the news reporter for the LA Times 2016, states that Olympic medalist, 6-time medalist Kim Rodney is against Proposition 63 because she says that it would affect her and other sports shooters. She says that she shoots about 800 rounds a day to keep up with their accuracy. Most sports shooters use large capacity magazine in their sporting events. Now that I finished talking to you about how it affects criminals and by banning large capacity magazine is because criminals would have to find somewhere else where they get the large capacity magazine. But passing this proposition would hope minimize the amount of people killed in a mass murder shooting because there would be less large capacity magazines in California. Now that I finished talking to you about the banning of large capacity magazines and how it affects criminals and people that use people that shoot as a sport, I would let you know how Proposition 63 will affect the buying and selling costs of ammunition purchases. First, people would have to pay a $50 fee every 4 years to renew their background check. Also, Proposition 63 will increase the cost of ammunition and gun-related products because state, local courts, and law enforcement costs will increase due to the new enforcement laws on these new gun regulations. I just informed you about Proposition 63, the banning of large capacity magazine and enforcing background checks on ammunition purchases. I told you about 3 different points. First, I informed you about how enforcing background checks on ammunition affects criminals and people with that shoot as a sport. Second, I informed you how banning large capacity magazine affects criminals and people that shoot as a sport. And also, I informed you how the Proposition 63 will affect the buying and selling costs of ammunition purchases. Now it's up to you to decide whether you think this proposition will actually make a difference and reduce the amount of people killed by guns. But just remember that those 13,000 people that were killed last year were not killed by the guns, but by the people pulling the trigger. Thank you.